Smile, you're on candid camera.
Well, Paul, what would you like to hear about?
I really don't know. I know what we was talking about earlier. You mentioned Bob Keyser's name. I hadn't heard that name in a long time. Maybe we can talk about some of that racing history there. What kind of... You said he was a little on the crazy side. My response was that all y'all were crazy.
Well, Bob, that place on 8th Street there was an old Gulf refinery, if I remember right. And they, or not a refinery, but a storage, because the railroad tracks, the old Monon, split there at the Y and went down to Pearl Street, and that's where the railroad yards were. You know, where they worked on them, and a round table down there. I think there's a round table down there. And I know there's a little station down there at Pearl and Culberson. But anyway, Keyser had Supreme Oil, and I'm like you. It was up there where Tharn.
Yeah, back in there where Mathis drugstore is now, somewhere in that area.
Yeah, and he got fooled in race cars, and of course he was an innovator. If your dad was alive, he'd tell you a lot more stories about him than I do, because he also had speedboats too.
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember him from the speedboat days.
Yeah.
The old hydroplanes. Buster Charlie had the close shave, and Dad had, I think his was called Loose Connection. I can remember Bob's name, but as far as really remembering what he looked like or anything about him, I was too little.
He was pretty large, hefty guy. Crazy as hell. And the Bob Smith that worked at doing the motors down there in the body shop drove his race cars. And if I ain't mistaken, he innovated something in one of those Chevrolet engines, done something to it that was far in advance. But he done it on his own. But he finally, I think now, he spent all his money fooling them damn race cars and got out of the oil business. But like I say, we went to Dayton, and Bob Smith drove for him, and they had a half-mile track on the outside of a quarter. Bob takes that car out there on the half mile and comes down through there onto the quarter, lost it, and went over the rail and everything. What the hell did you do that for, Bob? See if I could do it. But we had a pretty good trip up there. I was driving number 20. Yeah, for Jack Wren in New Albany. And I sat on the pole. But do you remember the gas feeds on the early models? They had a little link about that long and had a little socket on each end that fit onto the throttle linkage. Well, I was trying to get too much in the race, and that thing popped off. That was the story of my life. Everything go wrong on it when I had a good position, you know. And then after that, we got into the Crosley racing over in the Armory, and there's a guy named he was out of Osgood, Indiana, Roush. Walden Roush. And he brought down a Ford first, and I drove for him, won a couple races with it. Then he come down when they started racing in the Armory. Well, he had the bright idea of putting a Ford 60 engine in that little Crosley, and it was so out of balance. It was plumb crazy, and I flipped it that night, and it was the night of the championship race indoors, and I didn't have a ride, and this guy from Cincinnati come down, and he had a sharp little Crosley and a fast little Crosley. And he didn't have enough points to race in this championship race. And of course, old Bill Kimball, he slipped over there and got talking big shit to him and said, how about me running that car for you in this championship race, because I got the points. The guy says, well, I brought it down here, might as well run it. So in the meantime, I slipped over there and asked Bill, I just flipped that Crosley over there. I said, can I run yours in there? Because I had enough points. And he said, oh, Jack, he said, I don't know. He said, I've doctored that transmission up in there, and the teeth are like razor blades. He said, I don't think it'll make it. I said, well, I'm little, you're big. Maybe it'll pull me better than it will you. Okay, he said, I'll let you drive it. That was number 69. We took off. It was a 100-lap race, and I think it was around after the halfway mark, I went around him in his own car and went on to win the race. And I felt pretty proud of it. And my father had never seen a race. He was in the stands. He come over to see me. And I never will forget, he started down out of that stands because we was having a picture made of all the pit crew and Bill, myself, the starter. Johnny McIntosh was the starter at the time. And this usher stopped my dad and said, you ain't going down there. He said, watch me. That's my son. Dad come down and got the picture, which I still have it to this day. I don't know whether you've got it or not.
Yeah, I've got a copy of it, yeah.
And I was very proud of it. And we went on to race several times in the armory with them little Crosleys. It was a lot of fun. And but the most fun I had was in July the 10th, 1950. I worked at a filling station, Charleston Road and McDonald Lane, a Golden Tip Stove Oil Company, pumping gas and so on and so forth. And I had been up to the Sports Drome when they opened up, watched the races up there, and that was in 1948, I believe. They built that track 47, 48. And I got so intrigued over the midgets that it just got to me. I was, man, I'd love to do that. So anyway, Pete Ben had a midget. He come down during the war, was stationed at Fort Knox. He brought his midget down that they had built up in Trenton, New Jersey. Number 98 had the Ford 60 engine in it, and he kind of gave me a little bit of the history. He said, we built that up there in a guy's basement, and he said the main reason to build that Ford 60 was to beat the outboards. He said the outboards run on a board track up there, and he said they was king of the boards, but these Ford 60s were a little bit faster. So anyway, he was drafted, and he come down to Fort Knox and brought that midget with him. Now, he said the midget was built in 1936. So anyway, him and his friend, Paul, I can't think his name right now. Anyway, they went to Illinois, and his buddy flipped the car, and that was back before they had them hand restraints. through your seatbelt and everything. And the first thing he done when you flipped, your hands went up like this. Well, he broke both arms, and he had a wife and 2 little children. He lived up on Floyd Knobs. And so Pete and them decided they would try to help him out because at times was tough and man needed to feed his kids. So they started a race driver school, and they announced it over. I was sitting in the stand. They announced it over there that they're going to have a race driver school, $10 a week for 10 weeks, for proceeds going to help him out. So I wasn't making but $25 a week at this filling station, but I had to try this out. So I signed up for it, and of course, Paul, you had Toonie McKim, he was a cousin or something. Yeah. Anyway, he was one of them. Bob Cook was a reporter for one of the newspapers over in Louisville. Anyway, there's about 10, 15 people signed up. And the whole idea was that they would wire the throttle open each week a little farther. In other words, when you first started out, you was chugging around there, getting used to the steering and so forth. And then they kept putting the throttle out. Then they said at the end of the 10 weeks, they would let us run one race. Well, back in them days, they inverted the start. In other words, the slow people was up on the front, the fast people in the back. Well, I knew that first race was going to be hell. Because all them hot dogs, these guys like Justin King, Ray Lyden, and all the hot dogs back in them days come down here to race. And I knew they was going to be a-coming. But I survived it, and I liked it. And at that time, the stock cars, or not stock cars, back then they called them hardtops, were coming in. People liked to see them crash more than they did midgets, So our gas man that delivered gas to the station, I said, boy, I'd love to have a car. He said, well, I'll just get you one if you want to race up there. I said, oh, I love that. So anyway, he got me a 39 Ford Coupe and bought me 2 new tires. Of course, they handled tires. And we put it there at the station. And our irony of the thing, my dad goes down to the factory and tells everybody at the factory, he says, that damn boy is cutting up a better car than I'm driving to work. So anyway, I did. I trimmed her all down, and of course I knew nothing about handling or anything. First night up there, I spent $2 and something for gas. I think, Paul, you got the picture of me flipping and laying there and turned 1 and 2 with gas, big puddle of gas. So anyway, that I was initiated real quick. So I thought, well, I'll leave it sit home, and I'll go up there and nib around to see what they do to make them work and handle and so on and so forth. I was walking through the pits with a new helmet. Looked like Parnelli Jones. I was bad. So anyway, Bill Emery owned a car in 62 Auto Parts. There was a junkyard up on 62. I barely knew Bill. Him and his brother run junkyards, Mallory and Bill. Mallory had one down on the Carden Pike. Do you remember where that was?
Yeah, sure do.
Anyway, he had a driver from Indianapolis called Kenny Toole, and Kenny wasn't showing up, and the car kept sitting there. Like, Bill, let me drive that car. No, he'll be here. Well, we waited to the last minute, and he hadn't showed up. And he said, well, I'll let you qualify. I went out, and I had never sat in the car. And like I've said many times before, after you got in the car, you had to kind of keep your pants up because you had to take your belt off to hold the door shut. back in them days, you didn't have welded door shuts and everything like that. Anyway, I went out and I qualified, I think around 4th, 5th, something like that. Never been in a car. As green as all get out. Anyway, Kenny didn't show up for the races. Bill said, well, you can go ahead and run it. Well, I've run it, and I think I finished 4th or something like that in the heat race. So got in the feature, and back them days, if you had a wreck, if the guy jumped out and was safe, they just let the car sit there. You know, it wasn't like now they throw out the yellow flag, get the wreckers, and clear the track. This was in turn 1 and 2, and the water out of this guy's radiator was running down, and he was sitting about in the middle of the track. Well, for about 4 or 5 laps, 4 of us kept going around, and we all go to the outside up there where it was dry. Well, I don't know whatever made they do it, or just fate, I guess. I dove to the inside, backed off till I let the car get through the water, and I stood on it, and I come out ahead, and I finished the race in 1st. Well, it was such a thrill. Win my first race that I ever rode in or anything like that. And then I got to carry the flag around, which used to be a big honor to carry the flag around. And when I stopped, people come out of the stands with their business cards. You know, said this so-and-so cleaners, 1 free clean, suit clean, 1 case of oil, 1 Zippo lighter. Matter of fact, half of these cards, I didn't use them. They're in the museum up at Salem. People's business cards in their name and so on and so forth. I kept them for years and years. And then after that, then I got a ride with Jack Wren's car, number 20. Done fairly well in that. I think Jack Lancaster used to be a policeman in New Albany. First started driving for Jack Wren, and then I got a hold of it. And from then on, I just kept going, and it got to where the Sports Drome couldn't open the gates till I got there. That's how much I loved it. And I raced there for quite a while, and then went to different tracks. I raced at the 16th Street Speedway up there in Indianapolis, crossing the big speedway. In Cotton Purdy's car, number 60, had a big rabbit on the back of it and everything. That's back when Cotton started driving with NASCAR. He finally got killed at Memphis, Arkansas in a Chevrolet. But I raced there. I raced quite a few tracks. Then I had to go in service. I went in service in 1954 to 56. And my dad used to go up on the river and fish off of the flat rocks up there and everything. And he met Mr. Clark, Pappy Clark. And he said, you tell that son of yours when he gets out of service, look me up. So I did. And let's see. I can't think of the guy right now who drove for Pappy. And he said, I had put brakes on that car every week that he drove for him. Man, you don't use that many brakes on a race car. And so he asked me to drive for him. Well, he had a 6-cylinder Oldsmobile convertible. I think it was about a 49, 50, 6-cylinder. So I raced about 3-4 races in it, and he built his 58 Oldsmobile. And it was a convertible. It got to be pretty famous. People knew the car more than they did me. Red number 4 convertible, Oldsmobile, 58. We raced Well, he built the car, and then we took it up to the sports drome before the season opened, and to test it and see set it up, and it done very well. But the fairgrounds was being built at that time, that speedway over there, and but we went up there to try it out. Well, there was a couple soreheads that didn't like for us going up to sports drome when they was all signed up to go to the fairground. Well, there's a little conflict there, and we never did race on the fairground track. But Mr. Clark got trophies for best looking car for a year, and this and that and other. You got pictures of this Miss Kentucky presenting him with a trophy. And we raced it, let's see, till 1964. Won a few races, and in 1964 I won the 100-lap Memorial Day race. And we couldn't keep up with the times. In other words, we'd run the same old car, and everybody was kind of jumping ahead of us with new equipment, this, that, and the other. I didn't know it, but Mr. Clark kept putting so much popper in it that the flame was shooting out of the back of that exhaust about 6 feet every time I'd back off. People would say, "What are you running in that thing? What are you running in that thing?" I don't know. And I didn't. I really didn't. But he put so much popper in it, it finally blew the bottom out of it. But in the meantime, I was experimenting. We had a few midget races up there in the meantime. They weren't near as popular as the stock cars. But I bought an old Pop Dryer midget. Pop Dryer was a famous car builder out in Indianapolis. Well, I took the thing home. I knew nothing about a car. Midget car. It had a Ford 60 engine in it. It's a nice looking car. I mean, it was compared to a Curtis Craft in a way. I mean, it was really nice looking. Well, we went up to the sports drome, and again, I didn't know what to look for or anything. All I did was put gas and oil in it. And so, again, they inverted the starts. I was one of the up in the front. I went down there in turn one, and it had a tubular front axle with the spindles put in there and welded. And then the radius rods come back and kind of hidden the weld. Well, when I went into turn one, all hell broke loose. That front axle broke and folded under, and back them days they had big oak timbers for a guardrail around there. Well, you know what happened then. I hit turn two, full blast. I mean, when that axle dropped down, I went on in and hit that rail. Well, it had a plastic windshield on it, and my head went forward, and it took 13 stitches and a few of my teeth out. And the ambulance come out there. I said, "You're going to the hospital." "What for?" "I ain't going to no hospital." "Yes, you are." I had to pull my goggles down. He said, "Take a look in your goggles." And they full of blood. I was bleeding like a stuck hog. Anyway, the car was ready for Clinton Brothers to put in the press because it was total. It was gone. That was the end of my racing career until Pete Ben got hurt at Osgood, Indiana, and he said, "Hey, Red, you can drive that thing down here to Sports Drome this next race we have down here, the midget race." "Oh man, I like that." So anyway, his wife told him he wasn't going to drive that race car no more. So we went over to the Sports Drome, and the car had been sitting 6 months or better in his garage. sitting on the trailer. So they pulled it over there, and we pulled it out on the track, and it just missed and carried on, everything like that. They realized it was the batteries. The ignition was just about shot. Well, under the seat, there was 2 of those round Bell telephone batteries that used to ring the bell on the telephone.
Yeah.
Party line stuff. Well, there wasn't no such thing as available, so they go out on the highway, found one of them barricade horses that's sitting there with a flasher on it. They politely borrowed the batteries out of that, brought it back to the track, and man, I mean, it let go. And I won the semi in that midget. That was my first race there, and first, you know. So then times were getting short, and on racing, I didn't have another ride or anything. A lot of the boys, while I was in service, that's kept me from going. But a lot of the boys, your dad, Bobby Watson, Bill Kimmel, and all of them, got to go to Daytona. Earl Bomber, he went down there. Earl was good. Charlie Glasser, he was good. He done real well down there. But that was about the end of the racing career for me. But I really loved it. I met an awful lot of guys. Your dad was one of my best friends, Earl Bomber. I'm 90 years old now, and all my fellow racing buddies are leaving us. Buddy Webb.
Yeah, we just lost Earl last week.
Yeah, we just lost Earl last week, and Buddy Webb just passed away. So many of the guys are gone. I miss them. And there's people like you, Paul. I raced with your dad, and you have raced and done very well. But it's something in your blood. I don't care who you are. Once you get bit by the racing bug, it really bites you good. And I really have a lot of gratitude for people like you that are younger than I am, that still makes it racing interesting to me. Now, we were sitting here in your garage, your little museum. You got a wall full of trophies, which you have won. You've done very well. You're having a little sickness problem right now, and you can't run. I'm sitting here looking at 2 cars, one that your dad drove and had other people to drive, and you've done very well. You can see that. And I'm so proud to have somebody like you that I'm legally blind. I'm not the best of health. I'm lucky that I got somebody like you that will come by the house, pick me up, and still make it interesting to see stuff like this. And every party you have, we get to see some of the old timers. A lot of them are going though.
Yeah.
And it's sad. It's sad, very sad. But racing, to me, was good to me. And like I say, the place couldn't open until I got there. That's how interesting racing was to me. Still do. I met your friend, Gene Harrington, and you 2 guys took me up to Indianapolis to the Speedway when A.J. Foyt had his display up there. One whole section was there, and it was good to see a lot of the old midgets and the cars he drove and everything. But Gene, he had a little health problems, and he was in a little 3-wheel electric chair, and I was in one of them walkers. God, I got wore out, and he zipped around there, and we went out and ate later. Just had a wonderful time. Gene owned a hotel over in Louisville at the time. So on the way out, I said, man, I wish I had one of them things. I wouldn't be as tired and wore out. And as we was leaving, and I made that statement, Gene looked over at Paul and said, Paul, I'll go half, you go half, and we'll get him one. Well, come Christmas time, them two wonderful guys gave me a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And
that was the kind of guy Mr. Harrington was.
yes, he was. And I can't say enough, and I'm about to get choked up. But he's the kind of guy that raced up there himself. Or he had cars there, and his son drove for him and everything. But he was very, very much into racing. And he could sit down and tell stories about racing up there, which I love history, and boy, a lot of it come out of his mouth. He told a lot of stories, and he won a lot of the races back in his days. I think it was back in the what kind of racing they call it?
He done a lot of sports car
racing.
racing.
Yeah, and road racing. And to this day, I still love to talk about racing.
Well, that's me. You know, it's beneficial for me when I get to come and get you, because I get to hear these stories.
Well, you talked me into. I'm not famous or nothing like that, but everything that I've done in racing and the trophies that I do have and my uniforms and literature and stuff, you talked me in to put them in the John Hayes Museum up at Salem.
Yep.
Because I had 3 stepdaughters, and when I pass away, if I didn't put the stuff that in a place like that, they'd go out in the dumpster. It don't mean nothing to them. But them little trophies to me is worth $1 million.
Yep.
And if somebody can see them afterwards, after I'm dead and gone, and remember me, it'll mean a lot. And when you talked me into doing that, I thought that's a good idea. And they're up there, and if anything ever happens to that place, them trophies and uniforms and pictures and everything is yours. Because I know you'd be a good keeper of them.
Yeah, you talking about sitting back and listening to stories the day that we went up and visited Roy Robbins?
Yes.
Is one of the most memorable days I think I've spent in a long time listening to the racing history.
Well, your friend, knowed Roy, lived up there near, what's that town?
Dennis Knight, he lived in Little York.
Little York. Anyway, he said, Roy's got Parkinson, and I don't know whether he'd even want to visit with anybody.
Yeah, I invited him down here for my old timers party, and
right,
we couldn't get him to get out and do that.
And so anyway, your friend that went to church with him and everything asked him if we could come up. Well, luckily he accepted, and we went up there, and we had one of the most wonderful talks, times, old time stuff. And
what was so amazing to me, you guys sat and talked about stuff that you done in the 50s,
yes,
60s, and it sounded like you done it last week. Roy could start a story and you could finish it, or you could start one and he could finish it, and it was like you did it last week, and it was incredible for me to sit there and listen.
And Roy was kind of famous in his own ways. He was the first winner of the Knoxville Nationals. They've asked him lots of times. Of course, he passed away, a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But they've asked him a couple of times to come up and be master of ceremonies and ride around the track and everything else. But he's about like old World Bomber. Once he's out of racing, he just He forgot it. No, he didn't forget it. He had other things to do, and he had a wonderful wife that talked with us and met with us up there, and we had a good time, didn't we?
Oh yeah, I loved that day. And I got a picture over there that he signed for me, probably the last autograph he ever
Right, and you cherish
put on
that, don't
paper.
you?
Oh yeah, I wouldn't take a farm in Texas for that picture.
Yeah. And then, if I remember right, the last get together you had here, what is it? The
Chili Bowl.
Chili Bowl.
Yeah.
You invited everybody here, which was very nice of you, and a lot of the old guys was still alive then, still here. Gerald Dixon and
We've got to where we deal with a younger crowd now.
Right.
You older guys, hell, you was ready to go to bed before the race started.
Yeah, and the racing equipment nowadays, the antiquated stuff that we drove, we thought was the best in the world. But now we look at stuff like you got sitting here in this little museum. I made a statement to you a while ago. I wish I had gotten to drive one of them. Because
I'd still let you do it.
Well, if I wasn't legally blind, I'd give it a try.
We go somewhere where you can feel your way around. Hell, you don't need. Dick Gaines says you don't need to be able to see to drive a sprint car.
Well,
You got to feel your way around.
That's true. And he was always famous as saying you drove by the sound, not by anything else.
He was one of the best.
He was one of the best, and I stopped by his place up there. He had a little place at Mitchell, Indiana. Wasn't it Mitchell?
Yeah.
Yeah. I stopped by there. He had a used car dealership in there.
Not too far from the old Carpenter bus.
Right. So I went in there, and I made myself known. I guess I'm too brave, but I went in there. And we got talking, and he said, "You go up there at Bedford and see Mr. Evans." The man that owned that place, it was the old Kmart store. But
Talking about the museum.
The museum. And he said, you go up there and see him and tell him that Dick Gaines sent you up here and give you a 50-cent tour. I went there brave as hell. Went in there. I said, where's Mr. Evans? Oh, that's me. There at the entrance. And I said, Dick Gaines said to come up here and give me a 50-cent tour. Well, we had the most wonderful time. He had that Hurtubise car sitting there that was very famous. You remember?
He had some beautiful stuff in that place.
Yeah. He said, there's Jim Hurtubise car that was sitting on the line. They kept telling him to push it on, and get started. Well, we walked over there and he raised the hood. There was a beer cooler in there. It didn't have an engine in it. That was the end of Jim Hurtubise racing, really. And he just wanted to be funny about it, I guess. And then there was a picture up on the wall, and he said, I don't know who that is. Somebody give it to me. I said, I know who it is. He said, who is it? I said, that's Pat Kirkwood. He used to come down there in the convertibles at the Sports Drome. They'd come down there, they'd rent cars, come down there, race, and then tear them up, let them sit. I said, I remember that, and they had a petty car in there and a lot of good history. Mm-hmm. And I thanked him. I said, I really enjoyed this trip, I guarantee you. And that's the first time I seen Mel Kenyon's car. It was carved out of concrete, sitting out on the trailer outside.
Yeah, somebody over at the Monument Place
they
blasted that out or cut it. I don't know how they did it, but
like a computer cutout.
Yeah.
And it had the cross on the tail. I remember this.
Yeah, it sat outside on a flatbed trailer for years.
And then later on, I got to meet Mel Kenyon. Paul and I went up to Columbus at an old timers get together up there, and I got to meet Mel. Mm-hmm. And me and Paul, we both Mel had a book published.
Yep.
And it was the most heartbreaking book I ever read in my life. Anybody didn't read that and didn't get choked up is wrong. It told about his racing career, how he got hurt, he burnt, how his wife, he met his wife at the skating rink, and how she rode a bicycle a lot and she fell off and was unconscious. It was so heartwarming. And at that one meeting up there, they all got together, and who was the reporter's name that had his wife or somebody to have this meeting? He said, "I'm going to leave enough money in my will to give everybody a toast," and this is what it was. And they had somebody to say, "If there's anything you'd like to say jokingly or any tidbit that you heard from him or anything," said, "stand up and talk about it." And this one guy got up and he said, this guy got hurt. He was in the hospital, and he went in there, and he had his head all wrapped up with toilet paper and looked like a doctor went in there. And he said, "Well, I got good news and I got bad news." He said, "You're going to make it." But he said, they cut off the wrong thing. Instead of cutting off your finger there, they cut off your penis. God damn, everybody went crazy.
Yeah, I remember that.
And
that was, Jerry.
Now, you knew him better than I did. And what?
I'm having a brain fade right now. Jerry.
Anyway, these are the things that I love. And I'm getting to where I can't go as much as I'd like to, but Paul knows that if I can make it, I'd like for him to come by and pick me up and go and meet some of these people that are older and everything like that. And we were sitting there listening to a bunch of this stuff, and I looked over there and I said, "Gearhead, Roger Koch."
Roger Koch, yeah, I remember.
He raced at the same time I did, or he was more of a builder. He was a genius.
Y'all flew together too, right?
Yes. Yeah, I got my pilot's license and was flying out of the Clark County Airport. And Gearhead, he had a plane there, and he had an old ragged pickup truck. And behind the truck there was a big dip. Well, he got out there and got in his airplane, and he took off flying. And when he got back, his truck went down in this ravine. He said, "I had a truck when I got up there, now I don't have one." And just talking to Gearhead make you laugh, you know. But we had a lot of fun. I don't know what else I could say. I got a lot of stuff on my mind, but I don't know what else I could say. I hope I didn't talk
One thing I want to back up to is when you were at the Sports Drome and the fairgrounds was being built, didn't you guys go over there and do some kind of sound testing or something?
Yes, we did. Bob Hall was the promoter over here at the Sports Drome, and all they had over there was a big ball diamond, the old Louisville. Yeah. But they were going to build this race car track and everything right near it. But the people in Audubon Park and all around there were concerned about the noise factor. So they asked, I think there was about 12, 15 drivers. They asked us if we'd bring our cars over there in this lot right where the racetrack was going to be built. And Bob Hall had a little old Studebaker there, and when he pulled the switch on these lights, we gassed it. When he shut them off, we let off, like we was going down the straightaway, making the noise that a race car would make to satisfy these people. Well, we was promised the damn moon. We gonna get tires, and we gonna get this, and we got that. They thought, I think this is right. The guys thought they was gonna get to run around the parking lot instead of just sitting there, racing their engine. Well, when we got back and went up to the sports drome to test our car that he built, that Oldsmobile, they called us to the garage and said, "You're all barred from over here." Why we went over to the sports drome was none of their business in the first place. And we was going over there. We was going to follow the group, Mm-hmm. But when they said we was barred, Mr. Clark said, "I'll take that car anywhere I want." And we never set foot. I sat on that track one time. What's Gary's dad's last name?
Whitson?
Huh? Yeah, Whitson. Bryce Whitson was a good friend of mine, and he had an old car over there. And we was over there one day, and he said, "Jack, take her around the track." I guess I made about 8 laps in that old car of his, and that's the only time I was on that track. And then when they built the Louisville Motor Speedway, we was invited all the old timers and everything over there, and they let us get out there on the track in B-class cars, just to have fun. That was quite an experience. They was Andy Hampton, all the guys are all there. It was like a reunion, and I guess I made about 4 or 5 laps on that track, but that was really the end of it. And then in 1967 was the end of my racing career. I got married to a widow woman, had 3 children. Life changed then. For instance, this is just a little anecdote. I had a little camp down on the river, down past the boat, the gambling boat. And I had this Corvette, 69, 67, I don't know, it was a Stingray. And I had them kids in the back, and I was coming up the road. Still had a little bit of that racing blood in me. I got her up about 70, 80, 90 miles an hour, coming up 111. When I got home, the girl said, "Mom, do you know how fast we was going?" I no longer had a Corvette. I got a family car. She said, "This is not for these children." Anyway, that's kind of like my life, except I have awful good memories. I love
that. You do. You have a really good memory.
Whenever there's a race on television, I love to watch it. I shouldn't say this, and it's detrimental to NASCAR, but racing ain't like it used to be. In other words, the old timers, they were innovators, engineers.
Exactly.
They knew how to cheat, and you can't tell me that race drivers didn't cheat. I don't care who they are. The ones that's running first and the ones that are running last. Everybody cheated. And also, every man on that track has got somebody following him, a next door neighbor or something. And they wouldn't give a dime to go out there and see Parnelli Jones make 1 lap for 50 cents.
By himself.
By himself.
Yeah.
So that's how racing is going. Even the guys running last are making the show. They're spending their money for fuel and tires and engines, and the drivers that's driving, they think they can win any race, or they wouldn't go out there. I mean, who wants to finish last? But that's just the idea of racing. And nowadays, they're so strict on rules. You can't hide nothing. Go down to Darlington and a lot of these tracks that's got these museums and look at the cheating corners. Some of the things that the guys did to get by. One that comes in my mind, Harry Hyde used to be Andy Hampton's chief and everything up here when we first started. Well, he went down there in NASCAR and he was quite famous down there. But one of the things that I can remember that they learned how to cheat, he had a son that followed him around and drove the tow truck. Anyway, they had it out on the line, and back in them days, you had to have so much height on the car, and they had like a hole, old garden hole, that they run under there to make sure it was clear. Well, Harry had his son to have a steel-toed shoe and stand there and drive up on that left front wheel so that it'd be high enough that it clear. Well, this inspector come by and I can't think of the kid's name, but anyway, he said, "Get out of the way." He said, "I can't." He went over backwards, he gave him a shove. He said, "That wheel's on my foot," in order to get the height. The coil springs, they used to put rocks in them. So when they drove out for inspection, it cleared. But when they got out on the track, them rocks crushed down there. Just simple things like that guys thought about. And
yeah, I'm with you. Research and development, NASCAR is, as far as I'm concerned, the safety aspect of it, yeah.
yes,
I'm all for that.
absolutely.
But let's let these guys be the geniuses that they are.
It was fun.
I'm not sure they were geniuses, though. You talking about them hydroplane boats and stuff?
Right.
I brought Buster's close shave out here and kept it for Jerry while he was having his auction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sitting right here where you and I are sitting right now. And I'm smoking this thing over, and I'm thinking, these guys that drove these things make sprint car drivers look like brain surgeons.
That's right.
Because they done some stuff that was just nuts. I mean, you got a straight 6-cylinder engine sitting in this boat backwards with the harmonic balancer gone off the crank and a sprocket welded to the front of this crank.
And turning the speeds they were.
And another sprocket welded to a steel tube that runs between your legs to go back there to that prop. And these two sprockets are married together with a double hitch chain with a master link in it. And I'm thinking, what idiot would get in there and turn, they probably wasn't turning 4,500 RPMs, probably. But I don't want no part of that. Then you start looking, and the main frame rails in the bottom of this boat are made out of 1x6s. That's what the motor mounts are mounted to,
Just
holding this motor in this
something
boat.
else, wasn't it?
I'm thinking, you guys make sprint car drivers look like brain surgeons.
I had a picture of that number 98 that I drove for Pete Ben. Somebody said, "Well, what's that thing on the side there?" Take a guess. I have no idea. That's the fuel pump. As you go down there, you got a gauge, and your gauge goes down. You get out there and do this number.
So you're driving.
It puts air into the tank and pushes fuel up.
Dad, when he drove later on, when the pump wasn't necessary, he still drove with one hand.
Yeah. And many years ago, motorcycle engines in those midgets were famous. And if you see a guy come along here and his fingers all off, he got his hand caught in that chain down there that was running the drive, you know. These were some of the old antiquated things that the guys put up with.
I remember.
No roll bars back in the days.
Yeah. I remember asking Dad one day, I said, "Did y'all have ice in your helmet bags?" And he looked at me like, "What?" I said, surely God y'all put ice in them, because I know you took your brains out and put in them bags before you put your helmet on your head, because you couldn't have went out there with a brain in your skull. Not the way you guys did it.
You know, those race cars nowadays has got them hydraulic shocks and all that. You know, them old friction shocks
Yeah.
was what they had to use. And if they wanted a little more, they'd tighten this nut up
Yep.
so the friction would be tighter. Just things like that that made the automotive field better than what it is.
Yeah.
You know, they've got so much. They should give the racing field a lot of credit. A lot of credit.
Oh yeah, yeah. Racing, the technology's come a long way, long way. But when you look at a sprint car, you can't see
No.
a whole lot of change from the 50s. It looks, now when you start getting into the real fine components, you start seeing some big differences.
Years ago, and Salem was one of them, was like cinders. The guys used to have leather face shields, or their face would come in and be bleeding. I mean, that's how hard they raced close to each other and stuff like that. They
Yeah,
were brave.
I've got Dad's goggles with his leather face mask. It's over on that shelf with one of his trophies. But I got pictures of him coming off of turn 4 at the little track at Salem at Thunder Valley back in, I think it was like 69 maybe. But I got a really cool picture of him coming off the corner, and the guy shot the picture looking straight at him. It's a pretty neat picture.
Well, my father worked at the tannery down there in the Albany. He made me a shoulder harness with sheepskin sewed to it and everything else that I hooked to the side of the car, the seat, on a 100-lap race or something like that, because you was leaning so hard and you were so tired. But if you had an accident and a car to fire, it ain't like today. They got them 5 hitch seat belts and everything.
It all comes apart at one pull.
And if I ain't mistaken, didn't you say you had a razor blade or some kind of knife that you could cut that seat belt?
Yeah, yeah.
Just things like that had saved lives.
Yeah, when we went to Salem, Dad had one of those, and I think Patty's husband, Jimmy, carried one. So if you ever got in a situation where, you're trapped in that car and it's on fire, somebody needs to get you out of there.
And Mel Kenyon made the statement up in Langhorne where he got, I think it was Langhorne, where he got burnt so bad.
Mm-hmm.
He said the damn fire crew come out there in shirt sleeves.
Yeah, yeah.
Look at the fire crew now.
Yeah, that's like the safety people up at the high banks at Salem. There's some top-notch people up there.
Right,
I
right.
mean, I'm pretty impressed with
And
the way
didn't you tell me some time ago that you pulled in out there at Thunder Valley or somewhere for the race? You said, I ain't racing. Well, how come? You don't have an ambulance. That was the smartest thing you ever done.
Well, that started out, I got a phone call from the promoter wanting me to come up there and race, and I asked a question on the phone. You going to have an ambulance there? Because I'm not running without an ambulance. And he said, well, this particular event, we're going to have one because the UMRA bunch is going to be there, and it's in their contract that we have to furnish an ambulance. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, let's me and you have a contract. You tell me that you're going to have an ambulance there every week, and I'll support you wholeheartedly. I'll be there every week. As long as you're running, I'm there. But if you're not going to have an ambulance, I'm not coming.
And most of the funeral people and stuff like that would bring that ambulance out for nothing for the glory of it.
Right, right.
They wouldn't charge them.
Well,
So
I think it was
why
going to
push it?
cost him $75 to have an ambulance there. I said, well, hell,
What's a man's
charges-
life worth?
charge us $2 more to get in and make sure the ambulance is there. I went to Western Kentucky Speedway one time. We'd run the night before at Chandler, so I had a bonus coming because I run in the top 5. This was a MMSA deal. So when we went to Western Kentucky, I got to looking at this racetrack and I'm like, oh, these people are out of their minds. The backstretch guardrail was hanging on a steel I-beam post, and the post was probably 4 feet higher than the top rail of the guardrail, and had a chain draped over it holding that guardrail up. So if you get a stock car into something like that, you got room to knock it down or whatever, and not take a chance on it tearing your shoulder off or your arm or your whatever. In a sprint car, that cage ain't that big.
Mm-mm.
So if that I-beam gets a hold of something, it's probably something you need pretty badly.
Well, here's the thing about it. Every driver that gets in there and pulls that helmet on and fastens a seatbelt knows the dangers of it. But the more you can take care of the safety of it, the better off racing's going to be. More fun to you and the spectator.
Well, we got ready to line up for that race, and I went and told Andy Bradley, who runs MMSA. I said, I'm not going to run. Plain and simple. There's no ambulance here. This racetrack I'm not running. I'm sorry. I just can't do it. And he said, well, you got a $250 bonus coming from last night and plus whatever you win tonight. And I said, well, being as I give all the money I win to St. Jude, I tell you what I'm going to do. I ain't going to qualify. I ain't going to run a heat race. I'm going to start on the tail of the feature, if you'll let me. And I'm going to run one lap, and I'm pulling in the infield, and I'm going to take whatever money I got coming and send it to St. Jude. So that's exactly what I did. I run one lap, pulled in the infield, sat there and watched the race. And
that's another thing about you, Paul, that I'm going to brag about. You've got a heart of gold. You've had benefit races for your dad. These young men that's races for practically nothing, you get them a trophy. Something that they can look back on. And I admire you for that. And St. Jude is one of the most wonderful things in this world for these children.
Yeah.
And what you did the other day, I thought was awful good of you to go up there with those handicapped children and walk around with them and say, yes, sir, well, I'll walk with you and we'll do this and we'll do that. They can't help because they're that way, but it helps life for them.
Yeah. Well, I've been blessed, Jack. I really have. My racing thing was a blessing. I raced for on and off 20 years and never really spent my money to do it. So
you're one of the most fortunate people in racing.
Totally blessed.
Because there's so many that broke racing.
Able Construction Company helped me tremendously. Bill Abel, I love him like a brother. And
well, didn't you help get his boys started in racing?
Well, yeah, kind of, sort of.
Yeah,
we had a benefit race at Clark County, not a benefit race, but a memorial race for Dad, because he was involved in the go-karts big time and raced with different ones, Jeff Maiden, Billy Smith, I don't know, it was probably a half dozen or better. But
how many people have you gone to see at a funeral home with a race car sitting out in the parlor?
Not too many.
That comes from your heart, man.
When Dad passed, we had that car right there, sitting in the lobby of the funeral home.
Right.
Yeah, sure did. But Yeah, racing's it's been good to me. It really has, and the people that I've met. To get back to where I was headed with that memorial race, Bill Abel and I called him and I said, Bill, I'm having a memorial race for Dad over at Clark County. I'd love to see you show up. Well, in that conversation, he said, I'd like to get Jacob a ride in a go-kart. And I said, well, let me make some phone calls, see what I can do. So I made a couple phone calls and I ended up calling Dean Worrell. And he put me in touch with his son, Colin, and he's going to put a cart together, and he wanted to know how tall Jacob was, what he weighed, what his inseam was, and all that, so he could get this seat mounted so when Jacob got there, it was something that would fit him. So we get there, and Jacob goes out, and Colin's got him a uniform and a helmet and got his name on the cart and everything else. So he goes out and Bill comes over. He looked good. Jacob looked good. And Bill comes over and he says, I think I'm just going to let him practice. I don't think I'm going to let him race. I said, oh, hell, leave the boy alone. He looks like a duck in water. Leave him alone. He'll be all right. So anyway, he goes out and wins the feature. Well, I had trophies about 3 foot tall, Dad's picture embossed on them and all kind of stuff, really nice trophies. And here's Jacob with this trophy, and I went over to Bill. I said, what you going to tell Amy? This is Bill's wife. And he's like, oh no. So he calls Jacob over and he said, Jacob, come here and call your mom. Tell her you won a trophy over here at the fair, and maybe the shock of it will be wore off time we get home.
There you go.
So he did that. It was all fun, and we had a really good night. And
well, that
got him started.
I'd like to put a nickel's worth in for old Clark Nichols. If anybody likes racing, knows where Utica, Indiana is, he's got a place up there in the museum that is full of pictures and things of old racing.
Yeah, a lot
cars.
of sports drome stuff.
Huh?
Lots of sports.
A lot of sports drome stuff. A lot of people don't even know about this place, and I try to build it up a little bit because I was so surprised when I seen it. But you can go in there and see pictures after pictures. There's race cars up there, everything. So I'm gonna put a plug in for Clark at his museum up there, and. He's a diehard race fan.
Oh yeah, he is that.
He don't miss a race at the Sports Drome.
Yeah, speaking of which, I'll put a plug in for him and Brenda both. When Mr. Harrington, when Gene died, I was wanting to rent that place to have a memorial.
And it was wonderful.
Get together for Gene. And Brenda called me back and she suggested, rather than me having the expense of renting this place, there was a car show that was going to be put on in a couple of weeks. How about let's put Gene's memorial in this car show as one package, and that way you're not going to be out the expense of renting this $2,500 facility or whatever it was. And I said, well, if that works for you, that's fantastic. I'm all in. Well, we did it that way. In the car show, they had, I guess there was probably 200 or better cars there. Really a good turnout. Mm-hmm. Beautiful day. Had a nice memorial for Gene, and it was a good day.
Yes, I highly recommend anybody has got the time and they want to see part of the racing world and some of the pictures and the things. It'll open up their eyes. Go up there, and it'd be worth the time.
Yeah, when you look, you'll see a picture of that guy that's in your screen right now when he was, how old was he in that picture with that red jacket, Jack? 20?
Yeah. That was taken in July the 10th, 1950, and I was 21.
21.
Mm-hmm.
You won't recognize him, I promise.